أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to this Hujjat seminar, which is live and interactive. We are talking about preparation for Ramadan. This is part one of two sessions which we'll be holding on this particular issue. This week we are focusing in particular on the fiqh rulings in relation to fasting, with a particular focus on the issues that arise or may arise in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next week, inshallah, we will be preparing for Ramadan and looking at how we can continue to make the best of this month despite the fact that we're in lockdown. We hope that you'll also join us for that session. It will be at the same time on Tuesday evening at 8:45 p.m. Before we commence this session, we will start with a recitation from the Holy Quran by Habib Tharu. Please welcome him with a salawat in your homes. Ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
I am reciting verses 35 and 36 of Surah Al-Ahzab, the 33rd Surah of the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما. وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد ضل ضلالا مبينا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind and the most merciful. Indeed, the Muslim men and the Muslim women, the faithful men and the faithful women, the obedient men and the obedient women, the truthful men and the truthful women, the patient men and the patient women, the humble men and the humble women, the charitable men and the charitable women, the men who fast and the women who fast, the men who guard their private parts and the women who guard, the men who remember Allah greatly and the women who remember Allah greatly. Allah holds in store for them forgiveness and a great reward. A faithful man or woman may not have any option in their matter when Allah and His Apostle have decided on a matter, and whoever disobeys Allah and His Apostle has certainly strayed into manifest error. Surely Allah the Most High has spoken the truth. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Alhamdulillah, we're very blessed this evening to have our resident alim, Sheikh Jaffer Ladak, and our resident alima, Dr. Masuma Jaffer, to
Salam, and welcome back to Quarantine Calligraphy. Today we're going to be writing words, so I hope you've been practicing your letters. You won't need anything downloaded today. All you need is any paper and whatever you're going to be using to join in with the class. Let's get started. Before we start with the words, I think let's do some of the warm-ups that we practiced in lesson 1. So I'm going to do this with my dip pen, but you can do it with whatever pen you're going to be using. So first we just want to do some lined strokes, thin and thick. If you are using a dip pen like me, try to do it upwards for thin and down for thick, but with a marker you can do it either way. And then let's do some of our curved lines. So thin, thick, thin, thick. Yeah, let's do our half circles. So
to the range of 28 miles as a round trip. So it could be 14 miles one way and 14 miles back again from the city limits. Then I can break my fast. Now, the fast doesn't automatically break when I am that far out. Okay, so for example, if I am, I don't know, traveling somewhere in the morning. So say if I go to Birmingham in the morning and I come back before Zohar, and I haven't done anything while I have been away out of town to break my fast, then my fast is still valid and I will continue fasting. I cannot break it once I return back home. So while I am away, while I am for 28 miles round trip outside of the city limits, I can break my fast. But if I don't, then I can't break it when I return. And that's really important to remember. If that's not clear, please do ask for clarification, and we'll go through it again. So those who are traveling cannot fast. They have to break their fast, unless obviously you're a frequent traveler or you're traveling for haram reasons. Then it's a different caveat. Okay, the next slide, please. Talks about fasting is not wajib on these specific people if there is darar or haraj. Now, darar is harm and haraj is unbearable. So let's look at each group of category of people and actually just spend a little bit of time looking at this, because this is really, really important. So if a person is ill, then fasting is not obligatory on them. In fact, they're not allowed to fast if there is harm on them by fasting, or if it's going to be unbearable. Now, harm can be in lots of different ways. So it could either cause an illness, it can aggravate the illness, it can intensify the illness, or it can delay the recovery. All of those things are considered as harm. And if it doesn't, you don't have to wait for the harm to happen. If there is a reasonable fear that harm will happen, then you are not allowed to fast. And if you do choose to fast, and that reasonable fear is shown up and it was actually harmful, then that fast will not be accepted. It is void, and you would have to give qaza of it. So you don't have an option to fast if there is harm to you by fasting. And also if there is unbearable hardship. Now, who decides what unbearable hardship is? That has to be the person who is fasting. It has to be their choice. And this is, again, going back to the Balik children. When they are young, it is, even if they're young, if they are Balik, it is up to them to decide when it is unbearable, not up to us as parents. And so they can break their fast, and they have to fast until it becomes unbearable. So you can't just say, well, it's going to be unbearable, so I'm not going to fast. With this, you actually have to fast until it becomes unbearable, and at that time, then you're allowed to break your fast. And for these people, you give the qaza, and when you're better, and if you remain ill till next my Ramadan, then you will give fidya. The group of people who are pregnant, all the schools agree that, all the marja agree that if there is fear for either the mother's health or the child's health at any stage in the pregnancy, then fasting is not obligatory on them. In fact, they're not allowed to fast. All the marja actually talk about specifically the last end stage of the pregnancy, the final stage, and they talk about it for after 7 months onwards. So usually at the end of the 7 months, so 8th month and 9th month, where there is more likelihood of there being harm without the mother really knowing. Because initially we're told that the baby will actually, the fetus will actually take from the mother. And the first trimester, the baby doesn't need to have, you don't have to increase your calories. It's more about getting the right amount of food. So the folate is really, really important in the first trimester. In the second trimester, calcium is really important because the bones are being formed and so forth. In the third trimester, it's about the baby putting on weight. So the extra calories need to be taken in. So by fasting in the last trimester, especially in the 8th and the 9th month, it could be difficult for the baby. It could also bring in premature delivery, so it may actually make you go into premature labor and bring the baby out earlier than it's ready to. So taking all that into account, the mother taking medical advice has to decide whether there is reasonable fear and therefore then decide whether she's going to fast or not. With the nursing mother, and again with the pregnancy, there is qaza to be paid and fidya and also if the fasts are not paid within that year before next Ramadan, then they would pay fidya again for those fasts. For the nursing mother, again, if there is this concept of zarar or haraj, which is, harm to either her or the baby, or unbearable hardship to her or the baby, then she is allowed not to fast. Now, again, she has to decide. Alga actually mentions, in fact, most of the marja mention the fact that if there is another option of feeding the child, then that option should be considered, unless the mother feels that this would cause unbearable hardship to either her or the baby. So it's not the concept of, I don't want to do this, I don't want to feed my child something else, or breast milk is better. It's a matter of whether the formula milk will cause unbearable hardship on her or the child. That she has to decide, and then decide whether she needs to fast or not. It's not a sort of blanket rule that if you're pregnant or if you're nursing, you don't fast. That's important to realize, that it's not a blanket rule. It has to be an individual's decision, dependent on whether there is fear of harm or unbearable hardship. And again, if the nursing mother chooses not to fast because she feels that there is unbearable hardship, then she will give qaza and fidya. And also, if she does not pay back those fasts within the year before Ramadan, then she will give another fidya for each of the fasts that she left. The last one is old age. And again, this is there is no specific age given. I've been asked this quite a few times. There is no specific age given. It really depends on when you feel it is going to cause you harm, or the doctors tell you that it's going to cause you harm if you fast, and medical advice has to be taken when it's about harm to the body, or if you feel that it's unbearable hardship for you. If that is the case, then you do not fast, and obviously you're not going to get past old age, so there is no qaza on you as such, and you will pay fidya for every fast that you leave. Through all of this, I think it's really, really important to listen to the medical advice, but also listen to our own bodies, but not be silly with it, because if you do fast and there is harm, then that fast is void anyway. So it's important not to, push yourself so much that you actually cause harm to your body, because that's not what Allah wants from us. And also to make sure that I'm the one who's actually deciding whether it's unbearable hardship or not. It's not on someone else to decide for me, whether it's my parents or my spouse or my friends. It has to be my decision. In the end, I have to be true to myself. I have to stand in front of Allah, and I have to explain myself to Him. And if I truly believe it is unbearable hardship, then there is no fast on me. Finally, I want to finish with Aga's response to the coronavirus. So can I have the next slide, please? Where Aga, and I'm sure most of you have had this sent to you via email or WhatsApp, where Aga was specifically asked about this holy month of Ramadan that is coming and the whole issue that we're in with the coronavirus. And Aga was asked about the fact that doctors have said, recommend that we hydrate ourselves, and it's important that we do, and it actually helps to increase our immunity and reduce the chances of getting the virus and so forth. Aga's response, and I've just picked up a few of the things, and I think that's the things that we need to concentrate on. First of all, he says you can't have this blanket, okay, no one fasts because of the coronavirus. It has to be looking at, again, darar and haraj, this concept of no harm and not being unbearable, okay? I need to make my own individual decision. So if I am someone who is more likely to get the illness, and there is actually fear of a harm from that illness, if I am someone who's already got the illness, so obviously there's fear of it becoming worse, aggravating it, or the delay being the recovery being delayed, then there is no fast on me. I would pay back its qaza later on. If I feel it is unbearable hardship in this environment, and we're not talking about stress levels, anxiety levels, and things like that. It is actually unbearable hardship on the body from the fast. That's important to look at. And Aga actually mentions that if you can take away this unbearable hardship by sort of doing things that will make it easier, so there's less likelihood of us contracting the illness by maybe staying at home, making sure that when we go out we have the protective personal equipment on, and in order to increase our salivary output, we can actually maybe chew on sugar-free gum which doesn't have bits that break off it. So there's lots of things that we can do, and again this also applies to pregnant women, nursing mothers, that if they can do something that will actually help them so that they don't need to leave the fast. So, eating the right types of food, making sure that they hydrate themselves properly, maybe even staying in bed and not doing much around the house, because the fast is wajib. Everything else is not, including nursing your child is not wajib. It's a very, very highly recommended mustahabat, but it's not wajib. So, even if it means I stay in bed the whole day and don't cook and don't do any of the housework, but it means I'm able to then fulfill my wajibat of my fast, and that's what I should do, and the rest of the family need to then chip in and help. Okay, so things like that are really, really important. So going back to Aga's response, he says try to do whatever you can to decrease the risk of contracting the virus, and therefore then the darar and the haraj then are lessened, and therefore then you would be able to fulfill your wajibat. And he talks about this concept of having a legitimate excuse. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on. Is my excuse legitimate? Who am I trying to kid? Am I trying to kid myself? Am I trying to kid others? In the end, I know and Allah knows. So I need to be true to myself. And if I truly believe that there is darar or there is haraj on me, then I don't have to fast, and I don't have to explain it to anyone except Allah. Okay? And notice when he has given this fatwa, the final point is he's not made it obligatory precaution. He's actually made it obligatory to fast. So this does not give us the option to look at another marja. When Aga gives a ruling where he makes it obligatory precaution, what he's saying is this is what he believes is wajib, but he gives us the option to look at another marja to see what their view is on the same topic. Here he's not given that. He's actually said it is wajib on us to fast unless there is darar or haraj. So we don't have the option to look at the next marja. We have to follow Aga's ruling and fast unless I feel there is darar or haraj on me. Thank you very much. I will pass it on to Sheikh to continue.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Often when seminars are conducted, especially around Shahr Ramadan, we immediately think about the spirituality of this great month. Of course, that is fundamental. But before that, we need to make sure that we understand our obligations and how to fulfill the fiqh of the fasting as well. So we have a good opportunity to be able to revise some of the laws that I'm sure many of us know very well, but allows us to be able to remember them, to make sure that we are performing them as per our obligations. So in terms of the presentation that I will be giving, inshallah, it will be to look at three areas. The first is to look at the niyyah, the elements around making our intention for the month of Ramadan. We will then look at some of the things which invalidate the fast and try to differentiate between those things which break the fast and those things which are not recommended or disrecommended in the fast. And then inshallah we will try to mention some of the principles to be able to navigate the issues between qada and kafara, that which you need to do to repay the fast versus those things which you need to do in order to compensate for breaking the fast. So in regards to the first, niyyah, intention, is required for those who are performing this wajib fast, because any act of ibadah, any act of worship requires a niyyah for us to be able to begin the act that we are engaged in. The niyyah that is required for us in the month of Ramadan does not need to be uttered out loud. In terms of it not even being needed to be formed in the heart, what is meant is that we just need to be knowing that we are performing this fast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in humility, in servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it does not need to be mentioned out loud. But in terms of the niyyah that we make, we need to make sure that when we state it is for the sake of Allah, we do not have any secondary reason or even any other reason coming in and replacing the niyyah. So for example, a person cannot think to themselves, I'm fasting, yeah, Shahr Ramadan is upon me, but I'm fasting because this will be good for a diet. You know, I might end up losing a bit of weight whilst I'm fasting as well. Or, for example, times are tough financially, may Allah protect us from that. Times are tough financially and I say, you know, if I'm removing one meal of the day, then I get to save money. This will help me in terms of saving money. Again, this would not be permitted. Or for us to say, for example, I am performing this fast in the month of Ramadan for a qasam that I have made, or a nadhr that I have made, a promise that I have made, or I'm doing this as qada for a previous fast. In terms of the month of Ramadan and the niyyah that you must make, it can only be for the month of Ramadan, and it can only be purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no other intention can be accepted. In fact, if a person says, I'm going to make a qada during the month of Ramadan, both the qada would not be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as of course the fast that you try to perform in the month of Ramadan as well. So we need to make sure that our niyyah is correct. In terms of the niyyah, we can also make the niyyah for the whole of the month. So for example, come the night before we start fasting, we can make the intention to say that I intend to fast the entirety of the month of Ramadan, or I can say at the beginning of each night, or before the fast begins, before the adhan of Fajr comes in, I will be able to say every night I am performing this fast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wajib, qurbatan ilallahi ta'ala, and so on and so forth. Of course, if, for example, I decide to choose the second, to make a niyyah every single night, then I need to make sure that I do keep it every single night. Of course, if I keep it at the entirety of the month, then if something comes in between, then I need to make sure that I am aware that I'm restarting my fasting for the month of Ramadan. We also have the issue of when the niyyah needs to be completed by. And that is that the niyyah needs to be done before Salatul Fajr, before the adhan of Salatul Fajr comes in. Now, if one has a scenario such that they sleep before the morning time and they wake up before Dhuhr, it is valid for them to be able to make the intention that they are going to start the fast. However, if they wake up after Dhuhr, they cannot make such an intention. The niyyah would not be valid. They would have to perform a qada, but of course they would have to ensure that they remain not eating in that day in which they have woken up. So you can see on the screen some of these notes have been mentioned, and also we have some of the details for those who have a wajib fast, such as a wajib fast that does not need to be made up immediately, like a qada fast, or also a mustahab fast. And it's also important to know that a person cannot keep a mustahab fast if he has a qada on him. So for example, right now, if a person still has a qada on them, a person must make up those qada, and so the niyyah of the fast must be to make up a qada fast before they start to embark on participating in a mustahab fast. I hope this inshallah covers the niyyah succinctly enough. Of course, if there are any questions, we will be taking questions immediately after the presentation, inshallah. So we move on to the next subtopic of our discussion, and those are the things which invalidate the fast. According to Maraji', may Allah bless them all, they have slightly varied opinions as to the things which invalidate the fast. Some Maraji' consider there to be 10 things. His Eminence Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Hussein al-Sistani, may Allah protect him and grant him the longest of lives to continue leading us. He has 9 things which invalidate the fast. Eating and drinking is 1 and 2, we can put them together. The act of sexual intercourse, which might be, and we can discuss if there's questions, but it would be the penetration, even to the smallest degree, which we can detail if someone needs to know. The sexual intercourse invalidates the fast, even if there has not been any ejaculation. Masturbation, if a person performs masturbation, his fast becomes void. Ascribing lies or false things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and the Holy Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This would be obligatory precaution. If someone intentionally ascribes something false or a lie to them, their fast would become void. After this, there are another group of things which invalidate the fast. To swallow thick dust. So what is important here is to know that it is specifically the comment of thick dust that would invalidate the fast. One in today's society can imagine a gust of wind and there would be dust from the floor. If it is thick and it enters and a person purposely swallows it, if a person is standing behind someone who is smoking and does not move and they inhale this, these things need to be understood, that there are different points to look into regards to thick dust and just dust itself. But those things which are considered to be thick, if it is swallowed, then the thick dust reaching the person's throat, that would void one's fasts. In the opinion of His Eminence Sayyid Sistani, the issue of immersing one's head into water, fully immersing oneself into water, is amongst the makruhat, which we will come to shortly, insha'Allah. Remaining in the state of janaba or hayd or nifas until the adhan of fajr, if a person requires the wajib ghusl of janaba, for example, and does not take it out intentionally until the time of Salatul Fajr, the adhan of Fajr, their fast would be void. Or the enema with liquids, if this is to be taken, then even if it needs to be taken for treatment, this would void the fast, and vomiting intentionally makes the fast void. His Eminence Sayyid Sistani also talks about the person who, for example, brings up something from their throat. For example, a person burps and with it comes up some sort of food and then swallows it back down again. This would also invalidate the fast, not just vomiting as well. So it is also important for us to know that although we have these 9 things which invalidate the fast, there are several things which are considered to be makruhat, those things which are disapproved for a person to do whilst they are fasting. His Eminence Ayatollah As-Sistani, may Allah grant him a long life, has a list of those things, which we will just mention a few of them, just so that we can remind ourselves and make sure that we try to avoid these things whilst we are fasting in the month of Ramadan or any other time that we are fasting. For example, doing anything that causes us weakness, such as giving blood or taking such a hot shower that it might cause us to feel so fatigued that it causes us a problem to be able to fast. Putting medications in the nose, if one does not know that it will reach the throat, and if one knows that it will reach the throat, it is not permitted to be able to do this. Smelling aromatic plants is also makruh for us to be able to do. Brushing teeth with a wet piece of wood is also considered to be makruh as well. Or, for example, putting water or any other fluid in the mouth without due cause. And one of the rulings is that if a person puts something in their mouth, for example, they are very, very thirsty, for example. A person feels like they're really just need to cool themselves down with. This also needs to be avoided as much as possible and has an impact on the fast as well, depending on whether we swallow it. We can come to some of these rules as well, inshallah. It's good to know that some of these differentiations have been made. Immersing the entire head in water, as was mentioned, is also considered to be a makruh act, which does not invalidate the fast in and of itself. So here, these are some of the things which invalidate the fast, some of the things which actually are makruh for us to be able to do during the fast, and it's good for us to be able to know which ones break the fast and which ones we should avoid. We also need to discuss the matter of qada and the matter of qada and kafara, and the matter of qada and kafara, which would require all 3 kafarat. So let's just mention this as an introduction to understand, and we can try to think about some of the matters which requires us to make up a qada, and those things which requires us to make up a qada and kafara. So we have 3 principal rulings here. The first one is those things which necessitate a qada but don't require a kafara. Number 1. Number 2, we have those things which are a qada for the fast, which also require a kafara. Now on the screen, you can see in front of you, inshallah, the slide that talks about how there are 3 different types of kafarat. Sometimes an act might cause us to have a qada and one of the 3 kafarat, which you will have to choose. And then there is a third time when a person may do something which is causing a qada and all 3 kafarat to take place. let us mention some of these inshallah, so we're a little bit acquainted with them. And of course we can either try to answer questions, or in your own time you can refer back to the Masail of Sayyid al-Sistani or your Marja inshallah. So what are those things which necessitate a qada but not a kafara? And there is a few lists, but I'll just mention a few of them. For example, if a person was to make an intention not to fast, or intention to do a breaker, something that breaks the fast, this in and of itself would cause a qada. But you would see, for example, another ruling where if water was to be taken to cool down the person, and it goes down the throat of the person, he drinks this, but of course he was not intending to drink it, but he wanted to cool down himself by having water in and around his mouth, then this would also necessitate a qada. Or for a person who doesn't know the rules of janaba, they are supposed to know the rules of janaba, but for whatever reason they haven't bothered to read, to check them, and a person then begins the fast whilst they're in the state of janaba, they would then have to pay back the qada, but there is not a kafara associated to this. However, a person who deliberately breaks the fast in one of the ways in which they are not supposed to be breaking their fast, some of the things that have actually been kept as the things that they're supposed to do during the fast to keep away from, if they do this, then they would have a qada and one of the three kafarat on top as well. So for example, if you intentionally leave a fast of Shahr Ramadan. So for example, a person wakes up and says, I'm tired, I've already done 12 fasts. I can't be bothered with number 13. You know what, I deserve a break. That's an example. Of course, may Allah protect us from this. But if a person intentionally leaves a fast of Shahr Ramadan, then they would be required to do the qada and the kafara. Now this would be one of three kafara that they have to be able to give. One of them is to free a slave. One of them is to fast for 2 consecutive months, which would be, for example, the whole 2 months at one time, or a person continuously for 1 month and a day, and then continues on the rest to be able to make up the 2 months. Or, for example, feeding 60 poor people, the equivalent of which is to provide a staple food to every one of those 60 people, the equivalent of which is called 1 mad, which is a weight, the equivalent weight of 750 grams, of which you would provide to them a staple diet such as wheat or bread or rice or barley or dates or something like that. Now the third category is if a person actually deliberately breaks the fast, but in a haram way, something that is outright prohibited for them to be able to do, such as adultery. God forbid. If a person does something like this, then not only would they have the qada, not only would they have the kafara, but they would have to do all three of the kafarat and not just be able to choose one of the three kafarat. And you can see that is mentioned on the screen in front of you under point number 3, that he or she can choose one of the three kafarat. Unless the fast is broken for a haram reason, then all three are required to be performed. And if it's not possible for you to fulfill all three or any of these kafarat, let's say you find it too difficult to be able to do so, it's just impossible for you to be able to do so, financially speaking, or the circumstances do not avail you of it, then you should give sadaqah according to your means, according to the capacity that you have. And also you must seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for not having been able to fulfill the kafara or the kafarat that were upon you. And the obligatory precaution is that they should give a kafara as and when they are capable to be able to do so. If, for example, your circumstances change later on, then you would have to be able to do so. So I'm going to just read one or two of the rulings from the Masail of His Eminence Sayyid al-Sistani. Allah protect him and grant him a long life. And that will just give us a flavor of some of these points in some detail, inshaAllah. So as an example, His Eminence Sayyid al-Sistani lists some of the ways in which it is obligatory, wajib, to make up only the qadha fast. He states in some cases, other than those that were indicated previously, only qadha is obligatory upon a person, and kafara is not obligatory on a person. Let's mention some of these so we're aware of them as examples. For example, His Eminence says, one does not do anything that invalidates a fast, that does not make the intention to fast, or pretends to fast, or intends not to fast. This is important because you might have someone who is just pretending to fast along with people. Often, sometimes a youth will just do something like as if he's participating with his family members or something of this nature. If a person who does not one does not do anything that invalidates the fast, but does not actually make the intention to fast, or pretends to fast, or intends not to fast, and the same applies if he intends to do something that invalidates the fast, then that person would require a qadha, but not a kafara. Or for example, in the month of Ramadan, if a person does not investigate whether or not the time of Salatul Fajr has set in, and does something that invalidates the fast, and afterwards it becomes known that Subh actually had set in, at that point a person would have to pay back a qadha. Or for example, often we come and we ask someone, what's the time? Can we go and just believe someone and say we take their word for it, that it's now Fajr time or it's now Maghrib time? Sayyid al-Sistani mentioned, for example, one who breaks his fast based on the statement of someone whose statement is authoritative from him, someone who he trusts to tell him what time Maghrib is. He tells him what time it is Maghrib, and he mistakenly believes this person, and afterwards comes to know that actually it was not Maghrib time. Based upon the belief that that person told you it was Maghrib time, you would have to perform a qadha, but there would not be a kafara for you in that particular circumstance. So here are some of the examples of when it would be upon you to make up a qadha. We'll just mention, for example, one or two times in which it would be obligatory for you to make up the qadha, and also to give the kafara as well. And His Eminence Sayyid al-Sistani says the following: if someone invalidates a fast of the month of Ramadan by eating, drinking, sexual intercourse, masturbation, or remaining in the state of janaba until Salatul Fajr has come in the event that he did one of these things intentionally and voluntarily, and he was not compelled to do so, then not only does he have the qadha, he also has the kafara, which is obligatory upon him. As an example, if a person invalidates his fast by means of something unlawful, whether that thing was fundamentally unlawful like wine or adultery, or something which has become unlawful due to a particular reason, such as eating lawful food or having intercourse with his wife when she is not allowed to do so, in these cases a person must give one kafara. It is sufficient for them as well as the qadha. However, the recommended precaution is that he should give the total kafarat, all three of them, and feed of the three different ones that are in front of him. So here, because you have all of these nuances in these rules, it is important for the person who is a muqallid of their marja to be able to return back to the fiqh of their marja, to be able to read the masail for themselves, to become acquainted with their responsibilities, and through that they will know how to be able to navigate some of these testing issues that might come our way, or things that we need to refer back to based on our past fasts. Inshallah, this presentation has been of help, and inshallah, we hope that all of our fasts are accepted by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we can maximize our fasts in this blessed month of Ramadan, which is nearly upon us, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Sheikh and Dr. Masuma, for your presentations. Thank you to all of you who are tuned in, who are listening and watching online. We've had a number of questions. Please do keep them coming. We'll attempt to go through as many of the questions as we possibly can. You should, I hope, see the questions on your screen in front of you. Let's just take one first. There are rumours that due to COVID-19, Ramadan will be cancelled this year and we will not be obliged to make the fasts up as the virus is God's creation. Is that true? I think the answer is fairly obvious by now, or at least I hope it is. Dr. Masuma, perhaps you just want to once and for all clarify that question, because it does seem to be going around quite a bit.
The rumours are wrong. Obviously, my Ramadan is not cancelled, and we pray that it isn't. It's such a blessed month. Why would we want it to be cancelled? There is so much barakah and blessing and forgiveness in this month. We should be looking forward to it, not dreading it. And as I said, it's everyone's individual decision, looking at Zahar and Haraj to see whether fasting is obligatory on them or not. And we pray that Allah accepts whether we fast or not, depending on what is due on us. He accepts that from us, and we grow closer to Him through this blessed month, inshallah.
Sure.
Inshallah. Thank you. So we have had a number of questions. I'm going to try and take them as much as I possibly can in groups and link up those questions which are related. But obviously there are questions coming in as we speak. So let's just take the question that's at the top of the screen, which is the one that seems to have had the most likes so far. It says, I'm not leaving home. However, 2 of my family members work for the NHS. And I presume, therefore, that obviously they will be leaving home, and therefore they may increase the risk, I presume, of this individual contracting COVID-19. Should I fast or follow the doctor's advice? It appears that the doctor's advice may well be not to fast, given the way that the question has been framed. Dr. Masuma.
Again, it's not a blanket ruling. They have to decide whether by fasting, does it actually cause them harm? Is there more likelihood of them getting the illness by fasting? There has to be reasonable fear. So it's not just doctors sort of saying as a blanket rule, no, you shouldn't, because obviously doctors will just look at the physical body. You're looking at your own physical body, and everyone's physical body is very, very different. So it's important for us to sort of look at our own physical body, look at whether there is reasonable fear, and then decide for our own selves whether we should or shouldn't fast. I don't see personally how not fasting would actually cause more likelihood of me getting the virus, because if my family member is going out and they're coming back, whether I'm fasting or not, the virus will, I may contract that virus. And like Aga says, if it's about keeping yourself hydrated, we just need to make sure we're eating the right types of food at iftar time, making sure we're hydrating ourselves as much as we can through the night, and then we have the option of having sugar-free chewing gum in order to keep our saliva continuously coming, so that our throats aren't dry. So I think it's an individual responsibility, and we have to decide for ourselves.
Thank you. Let's look at some questions in relation to Nia. So we have a couple of those. Sheikh, perhaps I can invite you to deal with these. So I'll ask both of them, and then perhaps you can then respond to both together. The first is, when is the earliest the niyat for the entirety of the 30 days can be made? And then there is another question, which I will also highlight. It says, on the topic of niyyah, does a woman who has a break for her menstrual cycle need to redo her niyyah after the end of the period of hayd?
Maybe Dr. Masuma can answer the question about the period, if that's... possible?
Yeah, so because the fast of the whole month is ibadah in itself, one ibadah, then yes, you make the niyyah at the beginning, but if you take a break, then you've actually broken up that ibadah. So when you restart fasting again, you will have to redo the niyyah again for the remainder of the month.
Ahsant. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The fast, of course, sets in from the subh of the morning, at the time of the adhan. And so our fasting is to abstain from that point onwards. If we are trying to say we can make a niyyah as early as possible, then of course a person from now is intending to fast in the month of Ramadan. But in reality, when it comes to this first night of the month of Ramadan, this is the peak time to be able to make the niyyah. That we've now entered into the first night, the dawn is going to be upon me, and I try to make my intention from there. There is no reason for us to be making a niyyah days in advance or something like this. We enter into the month, and the idea of the niyyah is to be in a state of focus, consciousness, to draw in proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the act. And so to do it on the first night, or as our morning is approaching, any time before the Salatul Subh comes in, this is the optimum time to be able to do our niyyah.
Sheikh, just on that point about fasting, we have a question that says, can one stop eating 1 minute before Fajr? Stop eating at, I think that should be imsak, but have water until 1 minute before Fajr.
Yes, so the imsak time is a precautionary time that allows us to have 10 minutes before the actual time of the adhan of the waqt of Fajr comes in. So it is recommended for us to be able to stop 10 minutes before that, because as you can imagine, we are trying to make sure that we are in accordance with the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, up until the adhan of Fajr, before that, we are allowed to be able to eat or to drink or to be in the state of janaba and so on and so forth. But the precautionary suggestion is definitely to wait till to stop at imsak time, which will be approximately 10 minutes before the adhan of Fajr comes in.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add something here on niyyah? It is very, very highly recommended that we join the 2 months together. So the Shaban to my Ramadan. And Aga is actually different to Sayyid Khoi, where he says that on the 30th of Shaban, you can actually make a dual niyyah. So you can make a niyyah that if this is the 30th of Shaban, then I'm keeping a mustahab fast or a qadha fast, whatever is due on me. And if it's the first of my Ramadan, then it will become, it is my Ramadan wajib fast. So you can actually, a lot of the times, you know, there's confusion whether this is the beginning of the month or not. So it's actually a really good idea for us to fast that last fast, just in case it may be the first month. And if it's not, it's really highly recommended to join the 2 months anyway. And the other thing is it actually helps us to get into the, get over the withdrawal symptoms that we will have of not eating, not drinking, not smoking, or whatever it is that you have the withdrawal from, and not lose out so much on the actual month, inshallah.
Inshallah. Ahsan.
Inshallah. Thank you. Let's look at the questions which have had the most likes, it seems. So we have one: if your work is 14 miles outside of your city limits and you commute there daily, does that make you a frequent traveller? Dr. Masuma, I think this is something that you had referred to in your presentation.
Yes, you're considered as a frequent traveller there because you're going there and back every single day. So you would have to fast when you're traveling. We haven't actually taken that much time to discuss the traveling rules to do with my Ramadan, because most of us will not be traveling. Most of us will be at home. So there's a lot of rules surrounding traveling and fasting. But in this specific case, yes, you would have to fast.
Thank you. The other question that seems to be very popular, Sheikh, relates to the issue of kafara that you were talking about. And it says, how does one free a slave if you have to perform all 3 kafaras?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, of course, slavery today is slightly different to slavery of the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sadly, slavery does exist in some quarters still, but it is generally quite so, it's very difficult for us to be able to find slaves. During the time of ISIS, they did put people into slavery. Certain places in Libya, slavery does continue, where human beings are caught and then sold off into slavery, which would be similar to the time. And actually the United Nations does facilitate, or groups of this nature, of charitable nature, do facilitate for being able to free slaves in its modern day context. So there is still opportunity to be able to do so, however narrow the meaning may be. The ahadith actually stated that if you cannot find one of these 3, then it drops. So if you state that slavery is unavailable today to free someone, or there is no means for you to be able to free a slave, then that obligation drops, and you would still have to fulfill the other 2 kafarat of the 3 that you would be required to do if all 3 were upon you.
Thank you. Dr. Masuma, perhaps if I can address the next question to you. It says, if I'm not fasting due to medical reasons, another person asks me if I'm fasting or not. If I say yes, I feel ashamed to tell the truth. Is that known as a lie? I presume if they were to not disclose that they were not fasting.
I think it's really important to understand how much of an effect lying has on our souls. I think the environment that we live in, we take lying very, very sort of lightheartedly. It has a huge effect on our soul, so much so that I think I'd rather feel ashamed, in inverted commas, than to have the effect of the lying on my soul. I don't understand why you would feel ashamed, because by not fasting, you're actually following God's laws. So if you're not fasting because you have a medical condition, if you're not fasting because you're in haze, or for whatever reason you're not fasting, that is also submission to Allah's will. And sometimes it's actually more difficult not to fast, especially when everyone else around us is fasting. So, you know, especially like if we're in lockdown and we're with our family and our children and everyone else is fasting and I'm the only one who's not fasting, it actually is really, really hard not to fast. But again, I have to remind myself that I'm following God's laws and I'm submitting to His will and I'm doing what He tells me to do. So I am in ibadah. So why would I be ashamed on that? So the simple answer is you shouldn't lie, and you should be proud that you're submitting to Allah's will.
Thank you. And sage advice there. So we have a number of questions in relation to specific issues that have been raised, specific examples. So let's go through these. The top question on your screen is in relation to chewing gum, and it says, when Ayatollah Sistani says that we're allowed to chew sugar-free gum, surely the flavourings used by the various chewing gum companies will go down the throat. Is this still permissible?
I suppose, because I've mentioned it, I should answer this. Sheikh, please, if you want to jump in, feel free to. My understanding is that there shouldn't be anything from the chewing gum that goes down your throat. So it literally should be something that is you're chewing on in order to increase the flow of saliva in your mouth. So if there is some sort of flavor that you can say is actually something that's going down my throat, which is not my saliva, but something else that is coming from the chewing gum that's going down my throat, then that would not be allowed. So it would have to be something that is sugarless, flavorless, and for the reason of increasing my saliva flow so that, for example, I feel like it will help me to not contract the illness, then I would do it. So that there's an akhlaqi aspect of it. I'm not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but there's a reason behind it.
Thank you. Sheikh, we have a question that's related to some of the points that you had raised earlier. And the question is, can I take my inhaler for my asthma during my fast?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My understanding is that it's permissible for us to be able to take the inhaler. Maybe I'm not a medical expert here, so I don't know, but I don't think it's considered to be anything as thick dust, and it's not considered to be anything as being eating, unless there's, Dr. Masuma, this is not considered to be thick dust as going down the throat. Is that correct?
Yeah, Aga says, in fact, it says Hui didn't allow it, but says Sasani does allow it. And he says
it does allow it.
Actually go down the throat as much as it goes down the windpipe.
Goes down the windpipe. So because it's not considered to be eating, it's not considered to be thick dust, there's no prohibition from Sayyid Sistani.
Thank you. Dr. Masuma, a couple of questions that perhaps if I can address to you in relation to some of the issues you had raised. The first is this: a 10-year-old girl has tried to fast, but each time she suffers from severe dehydration or vomits. Should she still attempt to fast? And if she vomits, is her fast void?
Yes, she should attempt to fast until it becomes unbearable, and she doesn't have to wait till it becomes so severe that she actually vomits. When she starts feeling lightheaded, she's allowed to break her fast, but she can't not fast at all. So she has to start the fast and then break it when it becomes unbearable. If she does vomit intentionally, then her fast is void, as Sheikh said.
Oh, apologies, I think I had my mic switched off. Hopefully you should be able to see the question in front of you. It says, I'm 12 weeks pregnant after trying to conceive for a long time, 5 to 8 years, and a few miscarriages. Will fasting be obligatory on me?
Again, I think you need to talk to your doctor, find out what, if there is a medical reason for you not to fast. We're told that a lot of the times the fetus actually takes from the mother. So it's the mother that will suffer rather than the fetus, especially in the early stages of pregnancy. But because you've had a few miscarriages and you've had difficulty conceiving, I think it's important that, in fact, at any time it's important to seek medical advice, and then decide after you've sought medical advice on whether there is hardship or fear of harm. Remember, you don't have to wait till harm, it's fear of harm. So it's your decision in the end, but after you've sought professional advice.
Thank you. And I presume that the answer to the next question is probably very similar. So let's just take it together. It says, whenever I've tried to fast, the acidity makes me vomit by about 2/3 of the way up through the fast and makes me suffer from severe tummy pains. Should I still fast?
So again, if this is a chronic condition that they have where they've, tried to fast and it happens every single time, then you can actually say, okay, this is something that, is I have this illness that I cannot fast, and therefore it's not obligatory on me. But if there is something you can take which will help you, so if it's not a chronic illness as such and it's just acidity, and you may be able to take certain types of food, maybe take something, some sort of tablet, something that will help, and then try it with different methods to see if you can make the fast. Then that would be, you would have to do that. So again, it's taking medical advice to see if there's anything, looking up on Google, trying to find the different ways of trying to manage the acidity, and then trying to fast. But if it's something that continues constantly, then you would then not fast.
Thank you. You mentioned chronic conditions, so I'm going to trouble you with the next question as well. It says, what are the rulings for people who have chronic conditions such that there are days where the condition has no significant impact, but other days where it does?
Okay, so again, you have to look at this concept of darar. Is there harm? When you're fasting and the chronic condition does not have any significant, the fasting does not have any significant impact on the chronic condition. So as long as you're not aggravating it, you're not making it worse, then you are expected to fast. And on the days that it does have an impact, then you don't fast, you break your fast. So again, it's not making a blanket decision over the whole month. So even with the pregnancy, the person who had asked about the pregnancy, even if you're a nursing mother, even if you have an illness, you may fast one day and take one day off, or fast 2 days and take one day off, or fast one day and take 2 days. It's like trying to keep as many as you can, trying it at the start of the day, and then breaking it when it becomes unbearable. So it's trying to do as much as we can of the obligation. So even with the 10-year-old child who was finding it difficult and getting dehydrated and vomiting, maybe not fasting all of them, and maybe fasting one-offs every other day or every so often and so forth. So we don't have to make a decision for the whole month. We can actually try as many as we can to fulfill as much of the obligation as we can. Remember, with every fast, there is so much barakah, there's so much blessing in this month. Why would you want to give that up if you didn't have to? And if you do have to give it up, then you don't lose out on the blessing and the barakah, because again, you're submitting to His will.
Thank you. Sheikh, we are told that praying our wajib salah is part of fasting. If we miss our fajr by not being able to wake up, is our fast still valid?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yes, these are two separate obligations. God forbid if a person does not wake up for their Salatul Fajr but has intended to keep the fast, their fast is still valid. They would, as normal, have to pay back their qada of their Salatul Fajr when they wake up, but they should continue their fast until their fast becomes completed at the adhan of Maghrib.
Thank you. Dr. Masuma, we've had a follow-up to the chronic conditions question. Let me just highlight it on screen. It says, do you make up the fast later, or do you just pay the fidya?
So again, if you are able to make it up, you would make it up. So for example, in winter when the days are short and you're able to make up the fast, then you would have to make it up. But if the condition is such that you're not able to fast at all throughout the whole year, then you would just pay the fidya. And if you can make it up later on in life, so maybe not that year but the next year, you would pay the fidya for not making it up in that first year, but then you would make it up as and when you can.
Thank you. The next question, if someone has stomach reflux, they feel the liquid going all the way to the back of their mouth and then back down, is the fast invalid? Sheikh, I think this relates to some of the matters that you were raising earlier.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So Sayyid Sistani talks about the issue of burping, or the issue of something coming up into the mouth and then swallowing it back down again. So I think the question is slightly different. If you could just remind me, the question said it comes to the back of the mouth, as in it comes up, or is it tasted? Is it up into the mouth, or is it just at the throat level? What was the question?
So the specific question says they feel the liquid going all the way to the back of the mouth and then back down again. Sure.
I'm not sure what they mean by back of the mouth, but if I just tell them the mas'ala, then maybe inshallah we can know what they mean by the back of the mouth, how far up they mean. So Sayyid Sistani in his mas'ala says, if a fasting person burps and regurgitates something that comes up into their mouth, so even in the question about stomach reflux, if it comes back up, then as an obligatory precaution, if he intentionally swallows it back down, then his fast is invalid, and he must keep the qadha fast and give the kafara, because of course this was something which was deliberately done in a way which is not a haram act of breaking the fast, but it was a way which was prohibited from doing so. So they would have to keep the qadha and give the kafara. And if eating that thing is unlawful, for example, when burping, if blood comes up into the mouth, because that would be something that is unlawful for you to eat. If blood comes up and you can taste it and you know that it is that thing that comes up from the reflux, and then you intentionally swallow it again, then it is actually better if you give the total kafarat, all three kafara. So in regards to the specific question of the back of the mouth, it depends what they mean by that. But as the opinion of Sayyid Sistani, if it comes up back into the mouth itself and he intentionally swallows it, then his fast is invalid and he is required to give a qadha and a kafara for it.
Thank you. We have questions coming in thick and fast. Thank you to all those of you who are asking. We will try and get through as many of them as we can. Dr. Masuma, I think the next question relates to the comments that you were making earlier about the joining of Shaban and Maha Ramadan. It says, is there a recommendation in the Imami fiqh to not fast on the day of uncertainty, Yawm al-Shak?
So as I said, on the day when, whether you're not sure whether it's the last day of Shaban or the first day of my Ramadan, Ayatul Sistani actually allows you to make a jurniyah, and it's important that we do fast, because if it is first of my Ramadan, it is obligatory for us to fast. So on that day of, although there is shak, we don't know which one it is, you would be expected to fast. When it comes to the end of the month, when you're not sure if this is the last day of my Ramadan or the first day of Shawwal, which would be the Eid day, which is haram to fast, then it makes it a little bit more difficult. So at that time, you have to try to figure out which one it is and what's the obligation on you. If there is total confusion, you have the choice, if we weren't in lockdown, to travel. So that the fast is, then you're not doing a haram act by breaking a fast if it is my Ramadan, or keeping a fast if it is the day of Eid. But when it comes to Shaban and my Ramadan, it is highly, highly recommended to join the 2 months. So even if I haven't fasted any fast in the month of Shaban, which is very highly recommended to do, I should at least fast the last few days of Shaban to join it with my Ramadan.
Thank you. We've had some questions about kafara. So it says, if last year I did not fast due to a medical condition and I have not yet fasted to make these up, do I have to pay kafara, Sheikh?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't catch it.
It says, if last year I did not fast due to a medical condition and I have not yet made up those fasts, do I have to pay a kafara?
No. If you are excused because of the medical condition, then you would have to be able to pay your fidya. There is no kafara upon you. So the difference between the fidya and the kafara is the difference between a penalty and a compensation, for example. So a person who requires to pay the fidya, they have that penalty to pay for, but a person who has broken the fast deliberately, then they have a kafara upon them. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, no, there is no kafara upon that person.
And just on that point, and on the point of making up or qadha, we have a couple of other questions. So it's a question that says, if I haven't kept a record of how many qadha fasts I have, and I haven't been able to make up any this year, what should I do, and how much do I need to pay? And I think there's a part 2, because it doesn't seem to link into any of the other questions, that says, if the amount is large and I don't feel I can afford it, what can I then do?
So let's say you can make if you can figure out the exact amount of qada fasts that you owe from the previous years, such as through your diary or such as through your email or something like that, that can give you certainty, then you need to be able to find a set number that gives you certainty. If you're between two numbers or three numbers, let's say you say, I'm certain I missed 5 days, but I'm not sure if I missed 6 days, then you are obligated to go on the number that you're certain with. Even though that may be lower and you're concerned that there might be an additional day, you still have to work on the lesser number of days that would require you, because you have certainty it was 5 and not 6. The third ruling on that would be, it might be that you have fasts from a previous year as well that needs to be made up, as well as the last year that needs to be made up. So you might say, well, I've not paid back my qada for 2017, and I also have qada for 2019. Which one do I give first? Ayatollah Sistani states that once you have figured out the numbers and you've got certainty in the numbers, you would have to give last year's, not 2017 as in the first year, last year, 2019, make up those qada first, and then try to make up the ones from the previous year. So that's how you would work out the ways, or to be able to pinpoint the number of days that you would need to make up, inshallah.
Thank you. Dr. Masuma, a question for you. It says, a 9-year-old girl has been underweight for most of her life and is under the care of medical professionals. She needs a high-calorie diet, there is a part 2, to maintain a medically acceptable weight. Does she still have to fast? She wants to, but her parents fear the medical consequences.
I think, again, if the medical advice is that she shouldn't, because there is a reason that she is actually underweight and that could be detrimental to her, then she would not be able to fast. So again, you have to look at the professional advice and what they're telling you. And here it's we're told that she is underweight and she has to take in a certain number of calories, and it would be detrimental to her if she did fast, because then she wouldn't be she would get more underweight, and that would be dangerous. Then she wouldn't have to fast.
Thank you. We have a question that seems to be popular on the likes, and it's also been asked a number of times. Sheikh, I think it relates to what you were discussing earlier. It says, what's the ruling of kissing your spouse when fasting?
It is permissible for you to be able to kiss your spouse, so long as it's not a way that would transfer saliva from one person to another, which would then be potentially swallowed. If the intention of kissing the spouse is in order to bring about arousal, that would of course be problematic, because if you intend to be able to bring about arousal, which then intends to perform an act which is prohibited during the fast, then this would actually break the fast and cause a person to require their qada. If a person is willingly trying to create this problem for themselves, or if a person kisses their spouse and this actually causes a person to, for example, ejaculate, depending on the intention of doing so, this would then cause a subsequent ruling in regards to qada and kafara. So whilst it may be permissible in and of itself to kiss the spouse, just to be very cautious of the consequences of that and the intentions of that act as well.
Thank you. Dr. Masuma, I have a habit of biting my nails. I do this unconsciously, but don't realise until someone alerts me for this. I think the question, although it's not explicitly clear, is, does this break my fast?
So if we do anything unconsciously, then no, it doesn't. But if I know I have this habit, then I have to be much more aware of it and, ask people around me to alert me to it, make sure that I'm conscious, being a little bit more conscious of it and cautious that I'm not doing it. So it's not just, okay, I do this, so fine, it's not my fault. but it's actually trying to be a little bit more cautious, being a little bit more conscious of it and not doing it. But obviously, if you do it unconsciously, then it doesn't break your fast.
Thank you. The next two questions are interlinked. Sheikh, perhaps I can invite you to respond to these. The first says, Salatul Layl is highly recommended in Ramadan. When I recite the 12 rakats, do I do a niyyah of qaza salah as I have lots and then pray Salatul Shifa and Witr? And the second one, again, very similar. In the month of Ramadan, there are many recommended salah and amal each day. What's the ruling on praying them when we also have qaza salah upon us?
Ahsant. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So as you know, Salatul Layl is highly recommended every night and not just in Shahr Ramadan. For those people who wish to be able to make up their qadha, then this is obviously obligatory upon them, and it should be done before they are trying to fulfill a mustahab act. The recommendation would be for them to pray their qadha and then to be able to pray their witr at the end, because that in and of itself is such a high mustahab act to be done just before the time of Salatul Fajr. So yes, a person can absolutely make up their qadha and make it as their night prayer, but of course in terms of it being the full recommendation of all the rak'ah of Salatul Layl, it would not be considered the Salatul Layl. You'd be considered as doing your qadha salah at night, in the darkness of the night, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give great reward for, and a person should then do their witr at the end of it. The second part of the question was, in the month of Ramadan, there are many recommended salah and a'mal each day. What is the ruling on praying them when we also have many qadha salah upon us? Again, we are obligated to fulfill our qadha first and foremost, and we will not be asked about our mustahab acts before being asked about our qadha and about the obligations that have been done, or the obligations that we have upon ourselves. So again, fulfill your qadha first. Even in the month of Ramadan, this brings huge blessing to a person, and they will still be taken as proximate, as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they would be in their mustahabbat acts, except that because they're fulfilling their qadha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so much more appreciative of this amal by virtue of you fulfilling an obligatory act than fulfilling a mustahab act. Inshallah, it actually takes you even closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the mustahab acts that you wish to be able to do. Many people on Qadr night, they try to fulfill as many qadha as possible. This is a culture that people stay awake and they recite 100 rakat namaz and they try to fulfill their qadha salah. Don't wait till the 19th or the 21st or the 23rd of Shahr Ramadan. Try to fulfill your qadha ASAP, because that is what is obligatory upon you.
Thank you, Sheikh. As you were speaking, we had another question of a very similar nature. Perhaps if you can just deal with that as well. It says, I have many qadha salah. Can I offer my qadha at the time of my nafila salah and then offer my wajib salah thereafter?
Yes, absolutely. A person can replace their nawafil. But of course, when we say replace their nawafil, what we mean is that if the nawafil, for example, is 2 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah, 8 rak'ah in total for the nawafil before Salatul Dhuhr, you cannot do 2, 2, 2, 2. You actually have to do your actual qadha. So it may be that you have a maghrib or an isha or a dhuhr or an asr. Whatever was obligatory at that time that you missed, you are obligated to fulfill that particular salah. If you were traveling and it was qasr upon you and you missed it whilst you were qasir, then you would need to fulfill the qasr salah and not the full salah. So you can do them at the time of the availability of nawafil, but of course you actually have to fulfill the qadha that was upon you with the niyyah of qadha and the acts that would have been required in that particular salah that you are trying to fulfill.
Thank you. I'm just going to clear those questions. Dr. Masuma, a question says, my lips are always dry and I often put Vaseline gel. Is that okay during fasts? And then they say, also, I hear we can chew sugarless gum whilst fasting. I think you dealt with that earlier, but I think we've had a number of people who have joined us a little bit later on. Perhaps if you could just go through those particular issues again.
So there's no problem putting Vaseline gel on your lips as long as you don't swallow it. So if you tend to lick your lips and there's a chance that you may swallow it, then you shouldn't put anything on your lips, including Vaseline or lipstick or anything like that. So be very careful that you don't swallow it if you are going to use it. And also, I think initially, yes, your lips will get dry, but your body actually does compensate for that, and it does work through it. So it's giving your body a chance to actually work through it is really important. When it comes to sugarless gums, as I said, as long as nothing goes down your throat. So the idea is to have a gum which does not have anything that goes down your throat, whether it's sugar, flavoring, bits of it, and then you can use it. And as I said, the akhlaqi of it would be to actually think about what the intention of chewing on that gum is. So I'm not looking at the fiqh, I'm looking at the akhlaq aspect of it. And if I'm just chewing on it for the sake of chewing on it, then why am I doing that? Again, there's a huge emphasis put on respecting the holy month of Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan. And actually, if you're not fasting, because fasting is not on you, you shouldn't openly eat outside or in front of people who are fasting to actually show the respect of the month. So again, if I'm sitting there chewing gum, am I showing the respect of the month if I'm just doing it for the sake of doing it? So I think all of these things need to be taken into account. And my intention, as Sheikh keeps saying, look at what the intention is behind it as well, is really important.
Thank you. Sheikh, we've had a question that says, if it's still daylight at Maghrib time as stated in the calendar, do we wait or just pray at the time that the Hujjat calendar says? As it will be iftar time.
That's lovely. Yeah. Whatever Hujjat says, you must follow. No, no. So this is a nice question. The issue of daylight being present in the sky is not the means to judge whether Maghrib has come in or not. What we have is three elements. We have the time of ghurub itself, which is a time which can be worked out in terms of the actual setting of the sun. And then we have the, depending on the fatwa of the marja, the recommended or the obligation to wait anywhere 7-13 minutes, depending on the fatwa, which actually is the recommendation to wait until the time of awwal waqt of itself for the salah to come in, the adhan of Salat al-Maghrib to come in. And then we have a third opinion which talks about waiting till the entire redness of the sunset has gone and now it becomes darkness in the sky. So we have these three different opinions. We have the ghurub of Maghrib itself, we have the delay after the ghurub of the Maghrib, and then we have the complete setting of the sun entirely, the complete setting of the redness in the sky altogether. So even if it is daylight, even if you can see stars, even if you can see the daylight outside, that is not the way to be able to judge whether it is Maghrib time or not. So the calendars that have been established for us are those that have firstly understood what time is the ghurub itself, what time does the sun set itself, and then based upon the precautions that are mentioned in the books of ahadith, in which our marajah have understood, that is where there is a delay between ghurub itself and the time that we actually recite Maghrib, Salah. They are two different things. So the reason as to why we follow the calendar is because that has included the delayed number of minutes, which allows for the time of Maghrib to come in. At that time of when adhan of Maghrib comes in, which may be 7-13 minutes after ghurub itself, that is the time of the adhan of Maghrib, and that is when we are supposed to break our fast, not whether we see stars in the sky or not whether we see still daylight in the sky.
Thank you. Dr. Masuma, we've had a couple of questions on pregnancy and nursing. I know these are topics that we have already dealt with, but perhaps if we can just deal with these specific queries. As I say, I think we've had a number of people joining us a little later on within the presentation. So the first is, I'm a nursing mother. Previously, during my first child, fasting resulted in my milk drying up completely. I fear fasting again with my second, and that my milk would dry up again. And then the other question in relation to pregnancy is, I'm pregnant and have been having morning sickness every day. I feel ill and weak. Will I still need to fast?
So taking it, let's do the pregnant one because it's on the screen at the moment. It's highlighted. Again, I can't tell you whether you should fast or you shouldn't. It has to be your decision, knowing what the criteria is. So the criteria is, do you consider it to be harmful to yourself or your baby? And again, you would look at medical professionals to tell you this. You would think about it for yourself. You would be able to know if the harm is being done to you by, you would feel it on your own self. We're told at the beginning the baby will actually take from you. So there's it's more about you being harmed. But again, if the medical professions are telling you that there may be harm to your body, you need to listen to that and take that on board. When it comes to unbearable difficulty, that is very, very subjective, and you have to decide how unbearably it is. If you can fast, and if there's any way you can fast, so if it means, like I said, stay in bed the whole day, get your family members to to sort of take care of you and serve you and look after you, then yes, fast and give them the opportunity to allow you to fulfill your wajibat. And that's an amazing opportunity that Allah would give them to take care of you so that you're able to fulfill your wajibat. So I can't tell you whether you should fast or not. That has to be your decision, knowing what the criteria is. When it comes to the nursing mother, the fact that your milk dried up previously and you're worried that it might happen with your second one, the Marja actually referred to, and again, Ayatollah Sistani specifically talks about the benefits of breast milk compared to any other type of milk. He takes that into account, but he also says that if there is another way of feeding your child, so formula, he actually mentions formula milk, then it is wajib on you to fast unless you think that it is causing unbearable hardship to your child or to you. So unbearable hardship would be, for example, if your child refuses to take the formula. Then obviously they would go through difficulty and it would be unbearable for them. So then you would be expected to fast. You would be expected to, not fast. If you are saying that no, breast milk is better for my baby than formula milk, and I want to feed my baby breast milk rather than formula milk, that is not enough reason to fast, unless you truly believe that it will cause detrimental harm or it will be unbearable for either you or the baby. You need to make that decision. But as I said, Aga does actually acknowledge that breast milk is better, but he also says that if there is another way of feeding your child, then it is wajib on you to fast unless there is dahar or haraj. Remember, fasting is an obligation. It's a wajib obligation on us. Feeding your child is a very, very highly recommended mustahabat. And also, I think we tend to forget that when we're fasting, the soul is so connected to Allah. And we know that when you're feeding your child, what is inside you, your thoughts, your mind, the way your soul is, actually has an effect on your child. So imagine feeding your child while you're fasting, even if you're not able to feed the child fully, even if you're able to only feed it a little bit. Imagine the effect on the child's soul from a mother who's fasting, whose soul is connected to Allah.
Thank you. Sheikh, we've had a number of questions in relation to what breaks a fast, in particular relating to brushing of teeth. So perhaps if you could deal with these three questions together. So I'll just highlight the first one on the screen. It says, if while brushing my teeth, my gums bleed occasionally, is it still permissible to brush during fasting? And then the other two are, when I wake up in the morning, I sometimes get blood in my mouth when I spit. Does my fast break? And what if I swallow what if you swallow your toothpaste? Is that okay?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, in regards to brushing of the teeth, as we mentioned in the things that are makruh, according to Ayatollah Sistani, he mentions that if you're brushing your teeth with a wet piece of wood, or in the context of what we have today with a wet toothbrush, then this is makruh. It does not invalidate the fast in and of itself. So brushing the teeth with toothpaste does not invalidate the fast, so long as the person does not swallow the saliva which has been mixed with the toothpaste. The lingering flavor or the taste of the toothpaste itself, which mixes with the saliva, it doesn't affect the person who is fasting. Now, in regards to the person who then brushes and blood comes out, again, if no blood comes out, this is makruh, then definitely by priority, if blood is coming out, then this is definitely makruh for a person. So they should try to avoid it, knowing that this is going to cause them problems. Either way, for the person who brushes, and of course there is now the wetness in the mouth, which is from an external source, not the saliva, or a person who brushes and then they have blood which may come out minimally from the gums, then they have to be able to gargle 3 times, spit 3 times. When they gargle, they spit out 3 times to make sure that that water which has come externally from the tap or wherever has been spit out and is no longer part and parcel of the saliva that is in their mouths. The person needs to make sure then that if water has come into their mouth, that they have got certainty that they've spit enough that no longer is that blood in their mouth, or no longer is that water there from an external source, which would mean that they would be swallowing that water consciously from an external source. So these would be the requirements for that person.
Thank you. And then the final question, before I'm afraid we're going to wrap up this evening, Sheikh, perhaps if you can deal with this as well, because it's to do with making up missed fasts. It says, I have 22 years of qadha fast that I need to make up missed during my periods, so periods of hayd, when I didn't know the ruling. What is the kafara for this?
If it's in regards to the issue of periods, can Dr. Masuma kindly...
Of course.
Thank you. So you need to figure out how many days it specifically is that you have missed. Because it was not done purposely, there is no kafara, but there is qadha and there is fidya that needs to be paid because it wasn't paid. You didn't repay the fast in that year. So once you've worked out how many days it is, you pay fidya for that many days of fast, and then you would give the qadha as and when you can, as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you to our speakers, to Dr. Masuma Jaffer and Sheikh Jaffer Ladak. Thank you to our audience. I'm afraid our time has come to an end this evening. I know that we've had a few questions that we were not able to deal with in full this evening. A lot of them were similar to the questions that were answered, but if you still have outstanding queries and questions, then I'm sure if you get in touch with our alim or our alima through their dedicated email addresses, which are on the Hujjat website, I'm sure that they will do their best to try and deal with or advise or assist as best they can with the particular issues that you have. As I said at the beginning, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. So next Tuesday evening at 8:45, inshallah, we will be talking about preparing for Maha Ramadan in lockdown, and we will be trying to focus more on the spiritual elements of Ramadan and looking at how we can maximize those, despite the fact that our situation this Ramadan is a little different to the usual, but we can still gain benefit from that, inshallah, and we will be discussing that. So please do join us for that session next Tuesday at 8:45 p.m. On the screen in a moment, you will see the schedule for the rest of the week at Hujjat. As you will know by now, I am sure there are a huge number of activities taking place online every single day. You can see that there is a packed schedule of multiple events on a daily basis. Please do take advantage of those. Although we are not able to be at the centre, there is still a lot that we can benefit from, and inshallah will be of use to us. Thank you very much again to all of you for joining us. Inshallah we will see you soon. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so today is the 18th of Sha'ban, and we're going to go through from today up to the 1st of Ramadan. We're going to look at a preparation of Ramadan, what we're going to do, how we're going to do, and how we're going to basically go forward. And we're going to look at three things. We're going to look at the sermon of the Prophet, we're going to look at an introduction to Quran, and we're going to look at Asma al-Husna. Okay, so three things: sermon of the Prophet, introduction to Quran, and Asma al-Husna. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the sermon of the Prophet that he gave on the last day of Sha'ban in preparation of the month of Ramadan. Okay, so this is how the sermon starts. He started off by saying, Ayyuhan nas, O people, innahu, indeed, qad aqbala ilaykum shahrullah, coming to meet you, he says, is the month of Allah. And he says it's with bil barakah, wal rahmah, wal maghfirah. Three things he said. One is barakah. Barakah means a lot, extra, lots of it. Then he said rahmah, lots of kindness, lots of mercy, wal maghfirah, and forgiveness. So three things in this month: barakah, rahmah, and maghfirah. Shahrun huwa indallahi afdalu shuhur. It is a month with Allah which is the best of months, he said. Wa ayyamuhu afdalul ayyam. Its days are the best of days. Wa layalihi afdalul layali. And its nights are the best of nights. Wa sa'atuhu afdalus sa'at. Its hours are the best of hours. Can you imagine? The Prophet used day, night, hour to actually emphasize that it's an awesome month that's coming to us. It is a month that calls you to be the guests of Allah. Do you know when a guest comes home, what we do? We go our extra special mile to do stuff for them. And here Allah is saying we are His guests in this month. Then He says, وَسَاعَاتُهُ, or rather He says, وَجُئِلْتُمْ فِيهِ مِنْ أَهْلِ كَرَامَةِ اللَّهِ. And He wants to make you in this month close to Him, one who is honored to Him.